I still remember that Thanksgiving morning as if it had happened yesterday. The crisp air outside, the smell of roasting turkey, and the chatter of my family in the kitchen, all of it should have been comforting. But that year, something felt different. Uneasy. Almost tense. "Mom, can you help me with the stuffing?" my daughter called, her voice too cheerful. I stepped in, expecting the usual warmth. Instead, I was met with a subtle glance that told me I wasn't quite welcome. My heart sank. I had spent weeks preparing for this day, cleaning the house, preparing my famous cranberry sauce, making sure every dish was perfect. I wanted my family to feel at home, to feel loved. And yet, "Mom, you can sit for a while," my son said abruptly. I paused, knife in hand. "Sit." "But the turkey." "Sit, please," he interrupted again, louder this time. There was something in his tone. Not disrespectful. Not exactly rude. But dismissive. Dismissive enough to sting. I hesitated, then obeyed. I watched as my children went about their tasks, laughing and joking, while I felt like a stranger in my own home. My husband had passed years ago, leaving me alone to raise them. I had given everything, my nights, my days, my health, to ensure they never wanted for anything. And here I was, served last, like an afterthought. The table was set. The turkey golden brown, potatoes creamy, green beans glistening with butter. I could smell the pumpkin pie cooling on the counter. Every sense screamed comfort and celebration. But every glance I received reminded me of my place, at the end of the line. "Mom, can you pass the cranberry sauce?" my daughter asked, not looking at me. My hands trembled as I reached across the table. I placed the dish down softly. Too softly, perhaps. I felt invisible. I could hear the laughter rising around me, the clinking of cutlery, the murmured conversations. And all I could think was, after everything, this is my reward? To be overlooked? To be last? I caught my son's eye for a brief moment. I searched for a hint of guilt, a flicker of recognition of what he was doing to me. But there was nothing. Only a polite, distant smile. And that smile broke me more than any harsh word ever could. "Everything okay, Mom?" my youngest asked, noticing my pause. I forced a small nod. Yes, everything's fine." But inside, I felt hollow. My dignity slipping away with every passing second. I had tried to prepare myself over the years for moments like this. Subtle betrayals, quiet neglects, they had built up slowly, like cracks in a porcelain vase. But nothing could have prepared me for this. My own children, serving me last at the table, on Thanksgiving of all days. I remembered the years I had spent making every holiday perfect. The ornaments hung with care. The pies baked with love. The small, secret notes in lunchboxes. The late-night stories whispered in darkness. And now, I was a footnote in my own family's celebration. A wave of anger surged through me, quickly replaced by sadness. How had it come to this? Had I been too patient? Too forgiving? I looked down at my plate, untouched, and wondered, had my kindness been mistaken for weakness? "Mom, don't you want some turkey?" my daughter asked again, finally looking my way. There was concern in her eyes, but it was too late. The damage was done. My sense of self-respect had already been chipped away, quietly, cruelly. I tried to speak, to assert myself. But the words caught in my throat. What could I say that would matter? I suppose I'll eat in a moment, I whispered instead. And I stayed there, pretending contentment, all while feeling invisible. The conversations at the table continued around me. Stories, jokes, updates about work and school. I forced a smile, nodded, laughed quietly when expected. And all the while, I planned silently. Yes, I planned. Years of being overlooked, of having my feelings minimized, had taught me one thing. You cannot rely on others to respect you. You must demand it, or take it in your own quiet way. I remembered the lawyer's visit a week ago. A quiet, deliberate discussion about the will. Names, allocations, changes, the legalese forming a shield around my dignity. My children had no idea. They thought everything remained the same. But I had quietly shifted the balance, placing value where respect had always been denied. I looked at my son again, across the table. He was laughing at some joke I didn't even hear. My stomach knotted. I realized then, I would not give them this victory. Not yet. Not ever. A silence fell over the table briefly, as if the room itself knew the tension I carried. My daughter reached for the gravy, and for a fleeting second, our hands brushed. There was warmth in that small touch, a reminder that not everything was lost. But the sting of neglect remained. I thought of my late husband, of the advice he used to give. Hold your dignity close, my love. Never let anyone take it from you. I whispered his words to myself, under my breath. Never, never. By the time dessert was served, my plate remained mostly untouched. The pumpkin pie stared at me, sweet and innocent, as if mocking my predicament. I realized then that the room would never acknowledge my worth. I would have to do it myself. I cleared my throat softly. I have something to share with you all, I said, my voice calm but firm. The chatter paused. Eyes turned toward me, a mixture of curiosity and mild impatience on their faces. My hands were steady, despite the storm inside. I looked around, each face reflecting moments of oblivion, of thoughtlessness. And I thought, let them wait. Let them wonder. They do not yet know what I have decided. Because yes, I had changed my will. Quietly, carefully, thoughtfully, a final act of self-respect. And when the time came, they would feel the weight of that decision. Not out of cruelty, but as a mirror to their neglect. I paused, letting the thought linger. It was enough for me to breathe easier, to sit taller in my chair, to regain a fragment of the dignity they had taken from me. The family resumed eating, unaware of the storm quietly gathering in the heart of the woman they had underestimated. And I allowed myself a small, secret smile. A smile not of revenge, but of quiet justice. Yes, I will not be last again, I whispered softly to myself, almost inaudibly. And in that moment, though no one could see it, I felt a spark of hope. A spark that told me my worth was mine alone to command, and theirs to recognize only if they chose. The dinner continued. Laughter, chatter, clinking cutlery, but I sat quietly powerful in my own resolve. The betrayal had hurt, deeply, but it had also awakened something inside me. Something stronger than sorrow. Stronger than disappointment. Stronger than the fleeting sting of neglect. And as I looked at my untouched plate, at the golden turkey, at the faces of my children, I knew this Thanksgiving would be remembered. Not for the food, not for the traditions, but for the silent reclamation of my dignity. Yes, I had been served last, but I would not remain there. Not in spirit, not in heart, and soon they would understand that. Sometimes when I sit alone in my quiet house, I think back to those early years that were both the happiest and the most exhausting of my life. I see the tiny hands that once clutched mine, the laughter that echoed through the halls, and the countless nights I stayed awake, worrying, tending, planning. I gave everything I had, every ounce of strength, for my children. Mom, can you help me find my homework? My eldest would ask, barely awake, hair sticking up in all directions. And I would sigh, tired but smiling. Of course, sweetheart. Let's find it together. I remember staying up late to sew torn clothes, to patch holes in socks, to mend scraped knees with gentle hands and whispered words of comfort. There, it's okay now, I'd say, brushing tears from a small cheek. Those nights were long. My hands ached, my back ached, but their small sighs of relief made it worth every moment. I loved being a mother. I truly did. Every smile, every hug, every I love you, Mom, made me feel alive. But somewhere along the way, the gratitude faded. The recognition I had expected, even hoped for, quietly disappeared. Small things first, dismissive glances, interrupted conversations, hurried replies. Then bigger ones, forgotten birthdays, unanswered calls, requests ignored. Mom, can you pick me up later? Or, never mind, my son would say sometimes, his tone impatient, though he tried to hide it behind a polite smile. And I would nod, forcing my heart not to ache too loudly. Sure, dear, no problem. I'd whisper, even though inside I felt invisible. I often asked myself quietly, is this what it means to grow old? To be forgotten by the ones you raised? The question lingered unspoken, because I knew my children would never understand the weight it carried. They saw a grandmother, a mother, someone who could endure, who could always wait. But I was more than that. I was their anchor, their silent protector, their constant. And yet slowly invisibility crept in. There were moments when the neglect cut deeper than I ever imagined. Like the time my youngest forgot to thank me for cooking their favorite dinner, shrugging as if the effort were nothing. Or when my son rolled his eyes at my stories of the past, stories I hoped would teach him something about respect, kindness, and family. "Mom, why do you always tell the same stories?" he asked once, a hint of impatience in his voice. I froze. My stories were pieces of myself, lessons wrapped in memories, bridges from my past to theirs. And yet he couldn't see it. He couldn't feel it. I think back on those silent afternoons, when I sat in my chair knitting, listening to the house hum with life, yet feeling entirely apart from it. I would glance at the photographs lining the walls, their smiling faces, milestones, birthdays, and I felt a swell of pride and an ache I could not name. The pride was constant, yes, but so was the quiet pain of being unnoticed. "Mom, are you okay?" a gentle voice would ask. And I would smile, forcing warmth into my tone. "Yes, dear, everything is fine." But inside, I was a storm of unspoken words, a river of hurt that never had an outlet. Sometimes, late at night, I would sit by the window and watch the stars, wondering if I had done enough. If my sacrifices had mattered. If my children would ever understand the weight of love that had carried them through every scraped knee, every broken toy, every tear-filled night. It wasn't dramatic betrayals at first. No, it was the slow accumulation of small wounds. The unacknowledged dinners I prepared. The quiet hints I dropped about feeling unappreciated, ignored, or left out. Each time, met with a shrug, a polite nod, or a hurried response that left no room for conversation. Each time my heart tightened, and I swallowed the hurt. I remember one Christmas, decorating the tree while they ran off to play. "Mom, hurry up. We're ready to open presents." And I wanted to shout to say, "Do you see me? Do you even care?" But instead, I smiled and helped hang the final ornament, my hands shaking slightly from exhaustion and quiet frustration. And yet, I never gave up. Never stopped caring. Never stopped loving. Because love, true love, does not count the hours or the fatigue. Love gives endlessly, often without recognition. And I gave. Always. Until it became invisible. Until I realized that some of the very people I had nurtured now barely saw me. "Mom, do you want tea?" my daughter asked once, noticing the faraway look in my eyes. I nodded softly. "Yes, thank you, dear." I let her serve me, feeling a mix of gratitude and sorrow. Gratitude for the care, sorrow for the years of being overlooked, the long hours that were assumed, the quiet pain no one ever acknowledged. It was during these years of silent suffering that I began to learn a difficult lesson. That dignity cannot always rely on recognition from others. That sometimes you must hold it yourself, protect it fiercely, and ensure it is never diminished, even if the world does not see. I think that is when the seed of quiet resilience was planted in me. When I realized that although I could not control their actions or their neglect, I could control my own response, my own worth, my own pride. And slowly I began to guard it, not with anger, but with calm, deliberate intention. Yet, heartbreak never faded entirely. I still felt it in quiet moments, a glance ignored, a story dismissed, a small thank you left unsaid. Each instance, a reminder of how deeply I had given, and how lightly it had been regarded. "Mom, are you sure you're all right?" my youngest would ask, still sensing the shadows behind my smile. And I would answer softly, "Yes, sweetheart. I'm fine." But sometimes even fine felt like a lie. Sometimes even fine was a mask to hide the ache of decades of silent sacrifice. I remember one rainy afternoon, watching my children play in the puddles outside while I stood under the porch roof, umbrella in hand, soaked to the skin. "Come inside, Mom," they called, laughing, oblivious to my presence. I smiled at them anyway. I loved them too much to let my hurt show. But inside, I counted every slight, every dismissal, every overlooked effort, until the list became a weight I carried silently. Even so, there were moments of beauty, moments when their laughter reminded me why I had endured. A small hug, a whispered "I love you, Mom," a shy smile. It was enough to keep me going. Enough to remind me that my sacrifices were not meaningless. But the imbalance was real. The hurt was deep. And I began to understand that love, even when unconditional, can sometimes be taken for granted. Those years taught me patience, yes. Endurance, certainly. But they also taught me vigilance. That love must be paired with self-respect. That sacrifice must sometimes be balanced with boundaries. That dignity, once chipped away silently, can only be reclaimed consciously. I sat in the quiet house, knitting needles clicking softly, and reflected on all of it. On the joys, the laughter, the pride. On the neglect, the dismissals, the invisible wounds. And I realized I had survived all of it. Stronger, wiser, and still full of love. But also still aware that I would never again allow my dignity to be quietly stolen. And in that realization, a quiet fire sparked within me. A promise, unspoken but firm. The years of silent suffering had taught me, yes. But they had also prepared me. Prepared me for the moment when I would no longer be overlooked. When respect, long denied, would finally be acknowledged. Yes, I had endured. Yes, I had suffered. But now, I knew the power of holding my dignity close. And I knew that one day, it would be recognized, not because I demanded it openly, but because I had earned it quietly, steadfastly, through every year of love, sacrifice, and unspoken resilience. It started with whispers. Soft, careful words, just behind closed doors. Words I wasn't supposed to hear. I pretended at first not to notice, thinking perhaps my imagination had grown too vivid with age. But no, I wasn't imagining it. Do you think Mom knows about the inheritance? I caught my son whispering to my daughter one afternoon, just outside the kitchen doorway. Their eyes darted around nervously, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I pretended to be busy with the dishes, my hands trembling slightly as I scrubbed the pans. I paused, letting the silence settle. Could it be possible? Were they plotting? Using my own kindness against me? My stomach knotted. No, surely not, I whispered to myself, but the doubt had already taken root. Later that week, I found the tax documents I had left on the counter moved. Not misplaced. Moved. Strategically, deliberately. I knew because only I handled those papers with care. And yet, they had been touched. Mom, I thought you filed these already, my daughter said casually, hiding a smirk behind her polite tone. My heart tightened. Yes, I did. They were just right here, I replied softly, trying to keep my voice steady. But inside, I burned. I had given my life to these children, and now they were encroaching on what was mine. Subtle, yes, but dangerous. The next incident was the smallest, yet it cut the deepest. My son dismissed my opinion during a conversation about a family gathering. Mom, you always worry too much, he said, as if my years of experience, my care, my attention to detail, were nothing more than trivial concerns. I swallowed hard, forcing a polite smile. I'm just trying to help, I whispered, more to myself than to him. The dismissal stung, not because it was new, but because it was repetitive. It was the accumulation of years of being ignored, overlooked, and treated as less than. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Am I imagining all of this? I asked quietly. Or have I been too blind all these years? The house was silent, yet I could feel the tension lingering in every corner. Every whisper, every glance, every little action, they spoke volumes. And I knew I could no longer ignore them. The following morning, I decided to test them subtly. I was thinking of reorganizing my paperwork today, I said casually, sitting at the dining table. My daughter paused mid-step, her expression betraying something she didn't intend to show. Oh, really? That sounds fine, Mom, she replied a little too quickly. I smiled softly, hiding my suspicion behind calm politeness. Yes, just a little spring cleaning, that's all, I murmured, my hands clasped in front of me. Yet, I noticed them both exchanging fleeting glances, quick, silent messages that spoke more than words ever could. It wasn't just the whispers or the documents. It was the little things, a sudden eagerness to please me, questions asked in a tone too sweet to be genuine, a careful positioning at the table whenever we discussed family matters. Each action small. Each action calculated. Mom, do you think this table arrangement is okay? My son asked, carefully adjusting the chairs while avoiding my gaze. I nodded slowly. Yes, it's fine, I said, but my mind raced. Why the sudden interest? Why now? Every instinct I had told me there was something beneath the surface. Something hidden. And then came the subtle manipulation of words. We just want what's best for you, Mom, they said repeatedly. I had heard it before, countless times, in countless forms. But now, in this context, it sounded hollow. An empty promise. A shield to disguise their true intentions. I began to notice how often my opinions were sidestepped. How often my suggestions were acknowledged only to be ignored later. Mom, that's a nice idea, but maybe not now, they would say, a polite brush-off that spoke of control rather than consideration. Each instance left a small bruise on my heart, accumulating into a weight I could no longer ignore. One afternoon, I overheard my son and daughter talking in hushed tones in the living room. She suspects nothing, my son said quietly. My heart stopped. They were speaking of me. Not of dinner plans, not of chores, not of ordinary life, but of me. My thoughts. My actions. My decisions. I pressed my ear closer to the doorway, careful not to let a creak betray my presence. We need to act carefully. She can't find out, my daughter whispered. My hands tightened into fists. My mind spun with disbelief. How had it come to this? How had my own children begun plotting behind my back? I retreated to my chair by the window, letting the storm of emotions settle. I felt the familiar ache of betrayal, the sting of neglect amplified by intention. It was no longer accidental or subconscious. This was deliberate, and my heart ached in a new, sharper way. That night, I sat with my knitting and reflected on everything I had given, everything I had endured, and everything I had ignored. I asked myself quietly, have I been too trusting? Too patient? The shadows of the room seemed to nod with silent agreement. Perhaps, I whispered to the empty space. The next day, I began observing them more carefully. Not with anger, not with accusation, but with the calm, careful eye of someone who had survived decades of subtle betrayals. I watched their gestures, their glances, their whispered comments, cataloging each one in my mind. The pattern was clear: disregard, manipulation, and stealthy plotting. Mom, did you see the mail? My daughter asked innocently. But I knew that she had gone through my letters. I knew the subtle shift in tone, the carefully crafted words that disguised curiosity as care. I felt my stomach knot again, the familiar tightening of dread. It was no longer just a feeling, no longer just a suspicion. The truth was creeping in, undeniable and chilling. My children were taking my kindness for granted. They were using my trust against me. And each day, each small act, was another step towards something I had yet to fully comprehend. I found myself talking to myself more and more, quietly, under my breath. I will not be naive again. I will watch, and I will see. The whispers of the house, once comforting, now seemed conspiratorial. Every creak in the floorboard, every rustle of paper, every faint laughter carried layers of meaning I could no longer ignore. Yet, amid the fear and suspicion, I remained composed. My heart may have ached, my pride may have been pricked, but my resolve was forming. I would not react hastily. I would not accuse blindly. I would observe. I would plan. I would prepare. And slowly, a sense of foreboding settled over me, quiet but persistent. It was the kind of feeling that sits at the edge of your consciousness, a gentle warning of the storm to come. I sensed that the betrayal I had endured in subtle doses over the years was now building toward a larger, inevitable climax. "Mom, are you feeling okay?" my youngest asked, noticing my quiet reflection one evening. I smiled gently. "Yes, just thinking," I replied, letting the words hang in the air. They nodded, unaware of the silent calculations and careful observations I had begun. I allowed them to believe I was still oblivious. It was necessary. Let them plot. Let them underestimate me. Let them continue their small acts of deception. Each whisper, each sly glance, each dismissive comment was a piece of a puzzle I was slowly assembling. By the end of the week, I felt the tension coiling tighter within me. The signs were everywhere, undeniable and deliberate. And yet, I remained calm. The calm of someone who had endured much, and who now knew that patience and observation were the sharpest tools in the face of deception. I sat by the window that evening, letting the twilight settle over the house, and whispered to myself, "I see you. I see everything. And I will not be caught off guard." A small, secret smile touched my lips, not of cruelty, but of quiet, powerful awareness. Yes, they were plotting. Yes, they underestimated me. And soon the balance of power, long skewed in their favor, would begin to shift. But that moment was still to come. For now I watched. I listened. And I waited. The day I decided to see the lawyer, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. Fear because I knew what this meant, taking control of a situation I had long allowed to slip from my hands. Relief because finally I would act quietly, deliberately, without anyone noticing until the moment was right. "Mrs. Thompson?" the receptionist called. My heart skipped a beat. I straightened my shoulders. "Yes, that's me," I said softly. The sound of my own voice surprised me with its calmness. I had been tense for weeks, thinking about this meeting, yet now I felt a strange steadiness. I walked into the office. The lawyer, a kind man with gray hair and gentle eyes, gestured toward a chair. "Please sit. How can I help you today?" "I need to make some changes," I began, choosing my words carefully. "To my will, to ensure my wishes are honored." He nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Thompson. Let's talk about what you have in mind." As I spoke, I felt a thrill, a quiet empowerment that came from finally taking action. I want to make sure that respect is rewarded, that neglect is not overlooked. My voice was steady, but my fingers twitched slightly on the tabletop. The lawyer smiled politely, understanding that some things are best left unsaid in legal language. I gave him the details carefully. Names, amounts, conditions. Every word deliberate, every clause intentional. I wanted no loopholes, no ambiguity. I wanted a clear record that my efforts, my sacrifices, and my dignity were protected, even if my children had failed to recognize them. "You're very thorough," he said, scanning the documents. "This will ensure your intentions are fully realized." I nodded, hiding the small, triumphant smile that flickered across my face. Later, as I walked home, the crisp autumn air felt invigorating. Leaves rustled along the sidewalk, and for the first time in years, I felt the power of quiet agency. My hands were steady in my coat pockets. My steps sure. I had been overlooked for decades, but now I was in control. Back at home, I noticed my son watching me from the living room doorway. "Mom, you're back early," he said, a hint of curiosity in his voice. I smiled gently, hiding the storm brewing in my mind. "Yes, I had a short appointment," I replied softly, placing my coat down. He nodded, seemingly satisfied, and left the room. And in that moment, I felt a thrill of quiet victory. He had no idea that every careful step I had taken today was a part of a plan he could not yet see. Days passed, and I moved with deliberate discretion. Each interaction with my children was measured, calm, polite. "Mom, do you want help with the dishes?" my daughter asked one evening. I shook my head slowly. "No, I've got it, thank you." But inside, I felt a spark of pride. Every polite refusal, every subtle assertion, reinforced my newfound sense of agency. I spent hours reflecting, thinking through every possible reaction. What if they discovered my intentions? What if my son or daughter tried to manipulate me before the plan could unfold? I breathed deeply, letting my thoughts settle. I must remain calm, observant, patient, I whispered to myself. There were moments of temptation. I wanted to slip hints, to test them, to see if they suspected anything. But I held back. Silence was more powerful than words. Observation more effective than confrontation. Every small act of patience fortified my resolve. One afternoon, I overheard my son muttering about finances. She wouldn't dare change anything, would she? I stiffened slightly, my pulse quickening. But I did not respond. I simply noted the words, the tone, the hesitation, and filed them away in my mind. Each little slip, night, each I sat by the window, made the web of truth quietly, more apparent, letting the flickering streetlights illuminate the pages of my plans. I will not be naive again, I whispered. I will not allow my kindness to be taken for granted. The familiar ache of betrayal surfaced, but it was tempered by a sense of triumph. I was acting now, deliberately, gracefully, with dignity intact. The kitchen became a sanctuary of planning. Notes tucked into my ledger, reminders hidden in the drawer, quiet observations logged mentally. Each meal shared with my children became a careful exercise in calmness and subtle control. "Mom, would you like some tea?" my youngest asked, bright-eyed and unaware. I smiled softly. Yes, that would be lovely. A simple exchange, yet a small victory in self-possession. I allowed my children to continue believing that I was passive, even indulgent. "Mom, can you pass the gravy?" my daughter asked one evening. I moved slowly, deliberately, passing it without a word of complaint or insight. They did not suspect that each simple gesture was a part of my quiet strategy. There were moments when the tension rose unexpectedly. My son would ask pointed questions about finances or family matters. "Mom, how are you planning for the future?" he would ask casually, as if testing me. I smiled, keeping my answers vague, carefully measured. "Just taking things one step at a time," I replied, letting the words settle without revealing my knowledge. In those moments, I felt the old sting of betrayal, but it was accompanied now by something stronger, control. I was no longer the passive figure they underestimated. I was deliberate, prepared, and aware. And I knew that patience, observation, and subtle action were more powerful than confrontation. The plan was not revenge. It was preservation. Preservation of dignity, of fairness, of the quiet justice I had earned through decades of love, sacrifice, and resilience. And yet, the thrill of empowerment was undeniable. Each calculated decision, each careful adjustment, gave me a small, secret satisfaction. I found myself smiling quietly during family meals, letting them think I was oblivious to their impatience, their manipulation, their subtle encroachment on my life. Little did they know, every movement, every glance, every polite word was being catalogued. Observed. Anticipated. "Mom, do you want help with your reading glasses?" my son asked one evening, noticing my slight squint. I shook my head. "No, I'm fine, thank you." But inside, I acknowledged the irony. After years of being underestimated, now I observed them. Every word, every gesture, every hint of deception. Even the small victories, like passing the gravy, holding my tongue during a dismissive comment, or simply maintaining my calm composure, became symbols of my regained strength. Each moment reinforced that I was no longer vulnerable in the ways they expected. One night, alone in the quiet house, I reflected on the changes. I am not powerless. I am not invisible. I am seen. By myself first, and that is enough, I whispered. My reflection in the window seemed to nod in agreement. The storm of betrayal had passed. Now, only a quiet, deliberate calm remained. Yet, the suspense lingered. I knew that one day, my children would discover the full extent of my preparations. They would feel the weight of my decisions. And when that moment came, I would not act out of anger, but with quiet, undeniable justice. In the meantime, I lived each day with grace. I observed, I reflected, I planned. Small conversations, casual questions, fleeting glances, All became pieces of a puzzle I would complete on my terms. And each day, my sense of empowerment grew, replacing the old ache of neglect with a steady warmth of confidence. "Mom, you seem different lately," my daughter remarked casually one afternoon, tilting her head. I smiled softly, letting the ambiguity linger. "Just thinking," I replied, and the answer satisfied her curiosity, for now. I allowed them to underestimate me still, because the power of surprise was part of my plan. The balance had shifted, but subtly, deliberately, and every day reinforced the quiet triumph I carried in my chest, a triumph built not on anger, but on dignity reclaimed. As I sat by the window that evening, knitting quietly, I whispered once more, softly but firmly, "I have taken control. I have guarded my dignity. I have acted. And soon, the truth will be seen. Quietly, carefully, irrevocably." And in that moment, I felt the warmth of a subtle, victorious peace. The pain of betrayal lingered like a shadow, but it was now tempered by empowerment. I had regained my strength, my resolve, and my quiet authority. And nothing, not even their plotting or deceit, could take that away. The tension was palpable as I entered the living room that evening. My children were gathered there, their chatter hushed as if anticipating something. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with a calm determination I had never felt so clearly. Today, the silence of years would be broken. "Mom, is everything all right?" my daughter asked, tilting her head, pretending innocence. I looked at her steadily, and for the first time, I let the disappointment in my eyes show. "No, it is not," I replied quietly. The words hung in the air, heavy with decades of sacrifice and neglect. My son raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? What's wrong?" His voice carried that familiar impatience, that assumption that I would always forgive, always remain the passive figure they had long relied upon. I took a slow breath, letting them feel the weight of my presence. "I mean, I have been overlooked, dismissed, ignored, and I will not remain so any longer," I said, each word deliberate, measured, yet tinged with quiet anger. They exchanged glances, unease flickering in their eyes. "Mom, this isn't necessary," my daughter began, but I held up my hand. "No, it is necessary," I interrupted firmly. "You see, years of kindness, years of sacrifice, have been met with indifference. I have been patient. I have been silent. But I will no longer allow my dignity to be disregarded." My son's lips pressed into a thin line. "Mom, are you saying what I think you're saying?" he asked, voice lowering, cautious. "Yes," I whispered, letting the weight of affirmation settle. "I have taken steps to protect myself, to ensure that the respect I deserve is recognized, even if you cannot give it freely." There was a pause. Heavy, lingering. The room seemed to shrink as the air thickened with anticipation. My children's usual confidence faltered. For the first time, they were unsure. "You changed your will?" my daughter finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper, disbelief lacing every syllable. I nodded slowly, a calm smile touching my lips. "I did. Quietly. Carefully. To reflect the truth of your actions and mine." The shock on their faces was almost delicious in its subtlety. Not cruelly, no, but satisfying nonetheless. The power of dignity restored, the quiet authority I had carried for years, now tangible, now undeniable. You can't do that," my son exclaimed, rising from his chair. His usual bravado was replaced with tension, uncertainty. It's unfair." I let him speak, allowing the emotion to fill the room, but I did not respond immediately. Silence, I knew, was the sharpest tool. I let him see the years of hurt in my eyes, the accumulation of neglect, the invisible burden finally revealed. "Unfair," I finally said softly, letting the word echo. "Perhaps. But unfair is how I have felt for decades. How it has felt to give endlessly, to be overlooked, to have my voice dismissed at every turn." They looked down, their faces pale. The words sank in. The realization of their actions, their dismissals, their subtle betrayals, now mirrored back at them. You've been planning this?" my daughter asked, her voice trembling slightly. All this time, I have been observing, I replied calmly, letting each word land carefully. Patiently. Quietly. Because I value dignity. Because I value fairness. Because I value the truth. There was a flurry of nervous movement. My son paced a little, my daughter wringing her hands. Mom, I didn't realize we didn't mean to hurt you, my son stammered, but his words rang hollow. I had seen the pattern for years, felt the small betrayals accumulating silently, and this feeble excuse did not absolve them. I know you didn't notice, I said, my voice softening, tinged with sorrow. But intentions do not erase impact. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, and disregarded have consequences. And today, those consequences are visible. They were silent now, listening, watching, feeling the weight of decades I had endured quietly, and the subtle triumph of control I had gained. Mom, please, my daughter said, almost pleading now. We will change. We'll make it right. Please don't be upset. I shook my head slowly. It is not anger you see in me. It is clarity. It is resolve. It is dignity reclaimed. I let the words linger, letting each syllable resonate. And I will not be swayed by apologies alone. Actions must follow respect. Respect must be given freely, not demanded. My son's jaw tightened. So, you're saying we have to earn it? I nodded. Yes. Earn it, demonstrate it, live it. Otherwise, the consequences are already in motion. Their faces reflected shock, disbelief, and, if I dared notice, a faint fear. The room seemed suspended in time, the usual dynamic of parent and child inverted. For decades, they had underestimated me, assumed my patience was weakness. But that patience was power, silent and unwavering. You mean we might lose everything? My daughter whispered, fear breaking through her composed demeanor. I smiled faintly, deliberately neutral. It is not my wish to punish, I said softly. It is my wish to ensure that fairness and respect are recognized. That dignity is honored. That is all. My son's pacing slowed. Mom, we need time to process, he said, his tone uneven. This is a lot. I nodded once. Take all the time you need. I have taken decades to arrive at this moment. Patience is a virtue, even now. But understand this, the foundation is set. The decisions are made. And I will not retreat from them. They were silent again, digesting the weight of my words. I watched, calm, composed, allowing the emotional gravity to settle in the room. Their expressions reflected a mixture of fear, regret, and an unspoken acknowledgement of my authority. I never realized, my daughter murmured finally, tears glistening in her eyes. All those little things, all the neglect. Yes, I said quietly. Every small slight, every dismissal, every overlooked effort has led to this moment. Not as punishment, but as a reflection of truth. I let the pause stretch, letting the weight of decades of silent endurance fill the room. I took a deep breath, my hands resting lightly on the arm of my chair. Do you understand now why I remained silent all these years? Why I observed and endured? They nodded slowly, eyes downcast. The confrontation had stripped away the usual defenses, leaving only honesty, reflection, and the undeniable reality of my experience. You have always been patient, my son said finally, his voice subdued. Even when we didn't deserve it. Even when he stopped, unable to finish. I was patient, I said softly, letting the words sink in. Because I believed in you. Because I loved you. But patience does not mean invisibility. It does not mean I can be disregarded endlessly. And now the balance is restored. Their silence was heavy. I allowed it to stretch, knowing that sometimes words were unnecessary. That the quiet understanding of truth can be more powerful than any argument or plea. Mom, my daughter whispered finally, voice trembling. We will try to make it right. We promise. I looked at her steadily, my heart softening slightly. Promises are easy, I said gently. But actions reveal truth. Show me your respect. Show me your care. Only then can trust be rebuilt. A quiet tension remained, but it was different now. Different from fear, different from betrayal. It was respect, earned through my composure, my patience, and my unwavering dignity. The confrontation had ended, but the impact of years of silent endurance and the subtle triumph of reclaimed power lingered like a heartbeat in the room. As I settled back in my chair, I reflected on the moment. The storm of emotion had passed, leaving clarity in its wake. I had confronted the ones I loved most, exposed the betrayals, and asserted my dignity. And though the full effect of my will and the subtle justice I had orchestrated had yet to unfold, I knew the foundation was laid. Yes, I whispered to myself softly, letting the words resonate in the quiet house. I have spoken. I have reclaimed my voice. And soon, the consequences will speak for themselves. I allowed myself a small, quiet smile, savoring the calm after the storm, the dignity regained, and the subtle satisfaction of knowing that the balance had shifted. The morning I decided to reveal the will, I felt a strange mixture of nerves and calm. This was the moment I had been preparing for quietly, patiently, for weeks. Every glance, every word, every small act of restraint had led to this. Today, the truth would be known. I gathered my children in the living room, asking them to sit. Their expressions were a mixture of curiosity and unease. My son shifted in his seat, fidgeting with his hands. "Mom, what's this about?" he asked, the nervous edge in his voice betraying his attempt at casualness. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of years of observation and planning settle. "This is about fairness," I said softly. "About respect. About what has been overlooked for far too long." My daughter's eyes widened. "Mom, are you serious?" "I am," I replied steadily. "I have kept silent for many years. I have observed. I have endured. But I can no longer allow neglect and disregard to continue unchecked." I reached for the envelope, my hands steady despite the thrill of anticipation coursing through me. "Inside this envelope," I said, placing it carefully on the coffee table, "is the document that ensures my wishes are honored. My will has been changed, reflecting what has long been ignored." Their faces shifted from curiosity to shock, disbelief flickering in their eyes. "Mom, you changed it," my son stammered, voice tight. "Why? We didn't think." I held up a hand, letting the pause stretch. "Your thoughts, intentions, or apologies cannot erase the years of neglect. I have acted to preserve dignity, to protect myself, and to ensure fairness is recognized." My daughter swallowed hard. "Mom, we never realized, we didn't know." Her voice trailed off, trembling with the weight of sudden understanding. "Yes," I said gently, my tone calm yet firm. "You did not see it. You did not honor it. And now, the consequences are evident." I slid the envelope toward them. "Read it. Understand the clarity of my intentions. And know this, every decision was made deliberately, thoughtfully, and with full awareness of the impact of your actions over the years." My son hesitated, eyes flicking between the envelope and me. "Mom, are you serious? All this for?" "For truth. For dignity. For fairness," I said softly, letting each word resonate. "And yes, for the consequences of being overlooked, dismissed, and disregarded." They opened the envelope together, unfolding the documents with shaking hands. Their murmurs filled the room, a mixture of shock, confusion, and tentative comprehension. "Mom, I can't believe it," my daughter whispered. "All this, after everything, you." "Yes," I said quietly, letting the silence of affirmation settle. "After everything. After decades of giving, of loving, of being patient. I have acted now, not out of anger, but out of the quiet certainty that dignity must be honored." I watched them as they read, my heart a mixture of sorrow and quiet triumph. Sorrow, because the love I had given so freely had been taken for granted. Triumph, because now, finally, the respect I had longed for was no longer a hope, it was a reality written in clear, deliberate terms. This is unfair," my son exclaimed, though the protest rang hollow. His voice carried a mixture of frustration and disbelief, the familiar arrogance now tempered by uncertainty. "Unfair?" I asked softly, letting the word echo. Perhaps. But unfair is how I have felt for decades, watching my sacrifices go unnoticed, my voice dismissed, my presence overlooked. This is simply the balance restored. My daughter's lips trembled. Mom, we never meant to hurt you, she said softly, eyes brimming with unshed tears. I know, I replied gently. Intentions do not erase impact. And I have learned, over the years, that actions speak louder than words. Your actions, or lack thereof, have shaped the outcome you now face. They were silent again, processing the weight of my words, the clarity of my decisions, and the undeniable reflection of years of neglect. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, but also with understanding. Mom, please, my son began, but I held up my hand. There is nothing to plead for. The will reflects what has already been carefully considered. I do not seek revenge. I seek acknowledgement, recognition, and fairness. They read through the documents, their murmurs occasionally punctuated by sharp intakes of breath. Mom, you really did this? My daughter asked again, her voice a mix of disbelief and awe. Yes, I replied, calmly observing the shift in their demeanor. I did. And now, the truth is clear. My dignity is preserved. My wishes are respected. And you must reflect on the years that led to this moment. I could see the flicker of realization in their eyes, the acknowledgement that the years of subtle neglect, dismissive remarks, and overlooked contributions had consequences. That every small betrayal, every ignored effort, had been catalogued quietly in my heart and mind, and now the record was clear, formal, and undeniable. Mom, it's overwhelming, my son whispered finally, sinking back into the sofa. We didn't realize. Yes, I said softly. You did not realize. You did not see. And that is why this moment is necessary. To honor the past, to reflect on the present, and to guide the future. I watched as they processed each page, each clause, each stipulation. The room was heavy with emotion, a mixture of regret, shock, and a dawning respect. Their usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by the understanding that the balance had shifted permanently. Mom, we will try to make amends, my daughter said finally, voice tentative. Promises are easy, glistening, I said, letting a quiet smile touch my lips. Actions reveal truth. Show me respect. Show me care. Only then can trust be rebuilt. Only then can we move forward with honesty and love. They nodded slowly, the realization settling. The weight of their actions, the reflection of years of neglect, and the undeniable clarity of my will left them humbled. And I, quietly, allowed myself a small sense of satisfaction, not from revenge, but from dignity regained. I leaned back in my chair, letting the room breathe, letting the silence linger. The storm of emotion had passed. The revelation had been made. The quiet triumph of careful, deliberate action had settled in the space between us. Mom, this we understand now, my son said quietly, voice subdued. Yes, I replied softly. Now you understand. And now it is up to you to reflect on the past, act in the present, and honor the future. A sense of quiet calm settled over the room. The shock had given way to reflection. The disbelief had transformed into acknowledgement. And the subtle victory, the preservation of my dignity, the quiet assertion of fairness, resonated deeply within me. I looked at my children, my heart a mixture of lingering sorrow and quiet pride. I have acted with patience, with care, and with deliberate thought. The rest is yours to process. And perhaps, in time, you will see the depth of what has been done, not to punish, but to restore balance. Their eyes met mine, tentative, reflective, changed. And I knew that while wounds may linger, respect, earned through observation, endurance, and deliberate action, had been reclaimed. I allowed myself one final reflection softly to the quiet house. The past has shaped this moment. Betrayal, neglect, and indifference have met consequence. And yet my heart remains open, my dignity intact, and my love, though tempered by lessons learned, endures. The room remained still, the air heavy with reflection, understanding, and the subtle weight of justice quietly administered. And I, at last, felt the release of decades of silent endurance, replaced by the serene satisfaction of clarity, balance, and dignity finally honored. The house felt unusually quiet that evening. The storm of emotion had passed, leaving only the faint hum of contemplation in the air. I sank into my favorite chair, the one by the window where the afternoon sun spilled across the worn fabric. I allowed myself a moment to breathe, to feel the weight of everything that had transpired. The heartbreak, the betrayals, the subtle triumph of dignity restored. "You seem calm," my daughter said softly, sitting across from me, her voice tentative. She hadn't been this quiet in years. "After everything, you're at peace?" I smiled faintly, letting the warmth of the sun and the quiet fill the space between us. Calm, yes. Peaceful, perhaps. But mostly reflective. I am thinking about the journey we have all traveled. The mistakes, the misunderstandings, the small cruelties we often overlook in the name of familiarity. My son shifted uneasily in his seat. "Mom, I don't know what to say. We've realized a lot. But it's hard to accept all at once." "I know," I said gently, my eyes softening. "Acceptance is never immediate. It is a gradual process, shaped by reflection and understanding. I have lived decades learning patience, and even now, I know it is required." There was a long pause, the kind that carries the weight of unspoken words and shared memories. I let the silence settle, letting them absorb the subtleties of my expressions, the quiet power of observation, the dignity of restraint. "You taught us without words sometimes," my daughter said finally, her voice trembling. "All those years, your patience, your silence, it was guidance." "Yes," I whispered softly. "Not through lectures, not through punishment, but through the example of endurance, of dignity, of measured action. Life teaches harsh lessons if we are willing to observe and listen. And I have always believed that dignity is something that must be preserved, even in the face of disappointment." I leaned back, letting my hands rest lightly in my lap. I endured because I loved. I observed because I cared. And when the time came to act, I did so not with anger, but with clarity, with careful thought. And now I hope you understand what that patience meant. My son looked down, voice subdued. "Mom, I can see it now. The little things we never noticed, the subtle sacrifices, the quiet strength, it's overwhelming." I nodded, a soft warmth in my chest. It should be. The quiet strength of a lifetime often goes unnoticed until the moment it is tested. And sometimes, it is only when the foundation of patience and dignity is finally asserted that its full significance becomes apparent. There was a long pause. I watched the light shift across their faces, highlighting both their realization and their lingering sorrow. The lessons of years had landed, not lightly, but with undeniable weight. "You've always been more than we understood," my daughter murmured, tears brimming in her eyes. "Stronger, and yet so gentle." I smiled faintly. Strength and gentleness are not opposites. They coexist quietly, often unseen. I have learned that dignity is maintained not in anger, but in measured response, in clarity of thought, and in the ability to act when necessary. They both nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. I could feel the subtle shift, the recognition that the quiet years of endurance had not been weakness, but wisdom, not inaction, but careful preparation. "I hope you carry this forward," I said softly. "That you honor dignity in your lives. That you treat those you love with respect, that you observe quietly and act deliberately when necessary. Life is fleeting, and the lessons we leave behind are more valuable than any fleeting anger or resentment." My son's voice was barely above a whisper. "Mom, I understand. Truly. I see the path you walked, the sacrifices, the patience, the courage." "Yes," I said gently, letting the word resonate. "Courage is not always loud. Often it is quiet, deliberate, and unwavering. And it is in these quiet moments that we find the truest measure of strength." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of shared reflection filling the room. I allowed myself to savor the subtle warmth that comes with understanding, with acknowledgement, and with the
You've
quiet
given us a lot
satisfaction
to
that
think
comes
about,
from reclaiming
my daughter
dignity
said
without
finally,
malice, voice small but steady. Anne, I think we're beginning to see how much we took for granted. Yes, I whispered softly, but acknowledgement is the first step. Reflection is the next. And from reflection comes understanding, and from understanding, the possibility of change. My son's lips trembled. Mom, we will try. We will do better. Not just for us, but because of you. Because of what you taught us without words. I smiled faintly, letting the warmth of those words seep into my heart. That is all I hope for. That the lessons endure, that dignity is preserved, and that love, tempered by respect and understanding, remains at the center of your lives. There was a quiet moment, almost sacred, as we sat together, reflecting on the past and considering the future. The weight of years, of betrayal, of unnoticed effort, hung lightly in the air, tempered by the subtle triumph of dignity restored and lessons learned. You've always been our anchor, my daughter said softly. Even when we didn't see it, even when we didn't understand. Yes, I said quietly. An anchor does not always move visibly. It holds steady beneath the surface, enduring storms quietly, preserving balance, ensuring stability. And sometimes, only when the storm has passed do its effects become clear. The afternoon sun shifted, casting long shadows across the room, highlighting the subtle beauty of this quiet reconciliation. We were not perfect. We were not unscarred. But we were present, and that presence carried with it the weight of understanding, reflection, and the possibility of a more honest, respectful future. I hope you remember this, I said softly, letting the words linger. Not just today, not just in this moment, but in all the days to come. That dignity matters, that patience has value, and that love, true love, is entwined with respect and acknowledgement. My son nodded, his eyes glistening. We will, Mom. We truly will. And I hope we can live in a way that honors everything you've taught us. Yes, I whispered, letting the words resonate quietly within me. That is all any of us can do. Strive to honor the lessons, to preserve dignity, and to love with both heart and discernment. We remained in silence, the quiet hum of the house carrying our reflections, our acknowledgements, and our shared understanding. The journey had been long, filled with heartbreak, disappointment, and subtle betrayals. But it had also led to growth, recognition, and the quiet triumph of dignity preserved. You've taught us so much, my daughter said finally, voice tender, eyes soft. And you've learned, I said quietly, letting a faint smile grace my lips. That even in suffering, there is strength. That even in betrayal, there is clarity. And that even in sorrow, there is the possibility of hope. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun on my face. The lessons had been delivered. The reflection had been shared. The dignity I had maintained, carefully, quietly, for decades, had been recognized. Yes, I whispered softly to myself, the words barely audible. I have endured. I have observed. I have acted. And in all of it, I have preserved dignity. I have preserved myself. The room remained quiet, the gentle shift of light and shadow a silent testament to the passage of time, the journey of reflection, and the subtle, bittersweet hope that the lessons of patience, respect, and dignity would carry forward into the future. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the peace settle over me, allowing the warmth of understanding and the subtle hope of renewal to fill my heart. The story had reached its quiet conclusion, not with fanfare, but with the serene, enduring strength of a life lived with dignity, reflection, and love. The morning was quiet, softer than I remembered in years. The sun spilled gently across the garden, painting golden hues across the flowers I had tended for decades. I walked slowly along the stone path, letting the warmth seep into my bones, feeling the earth beneath my feet. For the first time in a long while, I felt a lightness I had not known, like the weight of endless worry, disappointment, and quiet sorrow had lifted, leaving only clarity. Mom, my daughter called gently from the kitchen window, her voice carrying a tentative hope. Are you okay? I paused, looking back with a faint smile. I am, I said softly. I've learned something important recently. That peace comes not from the world around you, but from how you carry yourself through it. She came closer, stepping onto the path beside me, her eyes reflecting both curiosity and a lingering worry. But Mom, after everything, it must be hard to move on. I shook my head, letting the breeze lift a few loose strands of hair from my face. Moving on isn't about forgetting the past. It's about honoring it, learning from it, and refusing to let it define who you are today. My dignity was challenged, yes. My love overlooked, yes. But I have discovered strength I didn't know I still possessed. My son joined us, his footsteps quiet on the gravel. Mom, you've changed the way I see everything. I feel remorse for all the times we failed to understand. Yes, I said softly, letting the words linger. Remorse is natural, but the future is yours to shape. The past cannot be undone. It can only inform how you act moving forward. And I have chosen to walk ahead with dignity, not bitterness. There was a gentle pause. I looked out at the flowers, noticing the way the morning light highlighted the petals, delicate yet resilient. Life, I realized, was very much like this garden, soft, vibrant, beautiful, yet demanding patience, care, and quiet attention to flourish. You taught us so much, my daughter said quietly, her voice trembling with reverence. About patience, about courage, about self-respect. I did, I whispered, smiling faintly. And I hope you carry it forward. Not for me, but for yourselves. There is a kind of freedom in self-respect, a kind of strength in quiet empowerment. I want you to see that even when the world falters, you need not falter with it. My son's eyes softened. Mom, do you feel lonely now? I shook my head. Lonely? Perhaps at times. But I am not diminished. I am not weak. I am whole. I have nurtured myself as much as I have nurtured others. I have reclaimed my worth. And that is the most powerful kind of independence, knowing that no one can take your dignity unless you allow it. I paused, letting the words settle. The air was thick with unspoken understanding, the soft rustle of leaves and the chirping of birds providing a gentle soundtrack to our quiet reflection. I realized then that moving forward was not a grand act, but a simple, deliberate one step at a time, guided by integrity, patience, and self-awareness. Mom, how did you endure it all? My daughter asked softly, curiosity mingled with awe. I smiled faintly, letting the memories surface. Endurance comes from love tempered with wisdom, from observing carefully, from realizing that while you cannot control others' actions, you can control your response. And in that response, you carve your own path, preserve your own dignity, and find strength you never knew existed. My son nodded slowly, absorbing every word. Mom, I hope I can learn that. I want to be stronger like you. You can, I said quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. It is not in grand gestures or loud declarations. It is in the quiet moments, in thoughtful decisions, and in the care you show to both yourself and others. Strength does not demand recognition. It thrives in subtle, consistent action. I turned to look at both of them, their faces reflecting the dawning awareness of lessons they had once overlooked. Life is fleeting, I said softly, and the only thing that endures is how we carry ourselves through it. My love for you has never wavered, but my self-respect, that has always been mine to protect. And now, I walk forward, confident in it, free from resentment, open to hope. The garden seemed to hum with quiet approval, the flowers nodding gently in the breeze. I let myself breathe, the simplicity of the moment grounding me, the warmth of the sun a gentle reminder that life, despite its trials, could still be tender and beautiful. Mom, we want to honor that, my daughter said softly. We want to show respect to you and to ourselves. Yes, I whispered, letting a quiet tear slip down my cheek. That is all I ask. That you remember the lessons, preserve dignity, and walk through life with patience, courage, and love. And that you understand, my strength was never for vengeance. It was for life, for freedom, for the quiet power that comes from self-respect. There was a long pause. I looked at my children, seeing not just their faces, but their awareness, their tentative understanding, their willingness to embrace change. And I felt a soft swell of hope, mingled with lingering sorrow for what had been lost, but tempered with pride in what had been gained. "Mom, will you be happy now?" my son asked hesitantly. "Yes," I said softly, letting the word linger in the morning air. "I am happy, not because everything is perfect, but because I have reclaimed my voice, my strength, and my dignity. Happiness is not the absence of hardship. It is the acceptance of it, the learning from it, and the quiet knowledge that you have endured with grace." My daughter reached out, taking my hand gently. "Mom, thank you for teaching us, for showing us, for loving us despite everything." I squeezed her hand lightly, letting the connection affirm all that had passed and all that was yet to come. Love is patient. Love is resilient. And love, coupled with self-respect, carries us forward, even when the path is uncertain. That is the legacy I leave you. Not possessions, not grand gestures, but lessons in dignity, patience, and quiet strength. We stood together in the garden, the sun now higher in the sky, warming our faces and illuminating the subtle beauty of a life reclaimed. The years of sorrow, betrayal, and quiet endurance had shaped me, yes, but they had not broken me. I was whole, independent, and at peace. "Mom, can we walk with you?" my son asked softly, almost in awe. "You can," I said gently, letting a faint smile curve my lips. "Walk with me in understanding. Walk with me in respect. Walk with me knowing that dignity is the path that sustains us when the world falters. And perhaps in walking together, we can learn to honor one another as fully as we should have all along." The garden seemed to breathe with us, the rustle of leaves, the gentle chirping of birds, the sunlight filtering softly through the trees. All of it a testament to resilience, renewal, and quiet triumph. I felt the weight of the years settle into something light, something tender, something enduring. "Yes," I whispered to myself, letting the words resonate deep in my heart. "I have endured. I have observed. I have acted. And now, I move forward with dignity, with self-respect, and with the gentle, unshakable strength of a life fully lived." My children stood beside me, silent, reflective, changed in subtle ways by the lessons, the revelations, and the enduring presence of a mother who had loved, endured, and reclaimed her own worth. And in that quiet companionship, I felt the first true warmth of hope, tempered by reflection, softened by understanding, yet strong enough to carry us all forward. "Mom, we will honor you," my daughter said softly. "Yes," I whispered, letting the words settle between us. "And in honoring me, honor yourselves. For dignity, patience, and self-respect are the truest inheritance one can leave. Carry it forward. Walk gently but firmly. Love deeply but wisely. And never forget that even in heartbreak, resilience and dignity endure." I let the morning sun fill my vision, the garden blooming around me, the world quiet and serene. And I knew in that moment that I had truly found the peace I had long sought, the quiet, enduring strength that comes from moving forward with dignity, with courage, and with love fully intact.